My name is Ruan Cilliers. I am from South Africa. I have a lovely wife, Cilliers, with 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, 7, 9, and 11. And yeah, our journey is really around what our ministry is called, which is Sihamba Sonke. It's the isiXhosa language, which is the language that Nelson Mandela spoke. And it's the same village that we are in is just around the corner of where Nelson Mandela grew up. And you'll probably hear the click, which is the click language in South Africa, which it's famous for. And the language is isiXhosa, which is the local language. And yeah, the ministry runs a chess program called Move with Purpose, which is a vehicle how to help young people discover their identity in God, discover belonging, and yeah, the purpose that God has for them in Ephesians 2:10. I've created good works for you. And that's the journey that I'm going to share with you going forward. So yeah, let me start. I think my first memories in life is when I was 4. And that was when my dad was still in apartheid era, living in South Africa on the border of Angola, which was at that time, Namibia was part of South Africa, and protecting the border between the black people and South Africa from the apartheid regime. I remember living on the Zambezi River with elephants eating mangoes in my backyard and not allowed to go swim because of the crocodiles in front of our house and the hippos walking past. There was also one traffic light in the community, which was green when the bar was open. It wasn't used for cars. It was yellow for last rounds and red when the bar is closed or the pub is closed. And unfortunately, normally you're happy when you see a green light. For me, a green light meant my mum sending me into the bar, telling my dad, come out of the bar, it's time to come home. My mum was too embarrassed to go in, so I was the messenger as a young 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old. As a son, your dad is your hero, and you want him to be your hero. But his dad died when he was 9 years old. My mum's dad died when she was 9 years old. They had nothing to imitate. And it got to the point where they were close to divorcing, and he had to make a call. And we actually changed church communities. And my dad came to do a father-son course. We did it as fathers together. What does it mean to be a real man? And yeah, just discovering manhood in context of the Bible. And there he met a new group of friends, new group of community, and God radically came to shift his life. And my dad showed me what it means to live a life worthy of imitation, to say sorry, to take up responsibility. And the change was because there was a change in community. And today my dad was running the course year after year for other young men, where he now became the story of hope to show other young men who's in the same journey and other older men as well, going on the course in what does it mean to be a man of God. And he could now imitate that. And part of his story was now bringing hope, saying, where you are is fine, I was there, but look where I'm now. So hats off to my dad that we went on a journey. The question is, when I was young and that wasn't there, what happened now? And I think the journey around being a sinner, doing things for God, that will give you identity, and it will give you belonging by doing things, by being number one in the team. I remember sport became quite a big driver in my life. And how can I be in the first team? How can I do well at whatever I do? Because you need to deserve your identity. You need to deserve that you're belonging. It's something that drives your being number one. And my whole life, I was trying to do things for God, to try get that identity. Because I was in this tension of no one showed me how to be a son, because you had to deserve and do things for him. And that went right throughout my school career, getting saved and actually journeying with God. But unfortunately, what was imitated to me was that. It was doing things for God. And even went to ministry. Me and my wife got a clear call to go to a village called Zithulele. And it was amazing when we got the call. We knew we had to go. But knowing my wife had a operation when she was 18 years old, we went to the gynecologist and he confirmed that, you probably will need to go to IVF route to have a chance at having a child. And it was really a question for us, God, can we step out of faith to really go to the village of what you've called us to go do ministry, leave the city from Cape Town to the village, but not have access to any medical services. And the gynecologist said, well, you can go, but you probably won't have children. So these villages are literally mud houses, still subsistence farming, no electricity, no tar roads. It is the fathers then who was taken away from the village to go work in the mines up in Johannesburg, which is about 15 hours north of where the village are, coming back to see their families once a year. Of course, doing that year on year on year on, they get other wives up there at the mines because they're just so disconnected to their families. So it's very common for broken family structures to just, because of the setup, that the fathers can't be there and they get minimum wage at a way that they don't have enough money even to come back more than once a year. So now you're sitting with young people. When you look at the official stats, only 19% would live with both their fathers and mothers. And of that, it's a big majority of the fathers who are actually home. That means they don't have work, which means they're actually abusive in many ways because they're not the ones who provide, so they drink a lot. 90% unemployment for the youth. So youth just sit on the street. They literally don't have work to do because there's no economy. If you don't have tar roads, if you don't have electricity, and if everything is subsistence, you have your cows and you have your goats and you have your chickens, but there's nothing to do. So there's no money that comes in. And there's no way if you don't have education, because only 4 out of 10 finishes high school, only 1 in 10 go to college. So now what you have in our community, it's not actually 1 in 10, that's South Africa stats. I'm talking about our village, 1% literally go to college at the time when I entered the village in 2011. So it was literally no hope. If 1% can get out of this, what about the 99? And I, as an engineer, traveled the world, worked for Siemens, worked telecommunications, but all of my whole life, I spent my time with youth ministry, and I would use my leave to take young men on adventure camps, and we go and help them discover their identity and who they are in God. We went on a hike with a friend, and coming back to Cape Town, literally the day before the time, it was a quick conversation, someone I actually didn't know well, and just asked, what are you going to do there? And she said, I want to go to this village, or I'm going to work somewhere else. But when she mentioned the village name Zithulele, something in my spirit jumped. And I got on the airplane, and I told my wife, I don't know what happened now, but the moment she mentioned that name Zithulele, something in my spirit jumped. Do you know where it is? My wife opened the map because she knows she did a community service there. And she started painting the picture I just painted for you in saying, but this is the context, You're going to struggle with access because it's not easy to get there. It's far away from everything. This is the old homelands. This is where everything is undeveloped, and it was pushed outside in call it the darkest corner of our country because it was inaccessible for the cities. And we didn't want the people to be, it was just economically, they wanted to develop the good parts of South Africa, and the rest is like, we can push the black people away. That was apartheid. So there's nothing there. You're not going to, as an engineer, I don't know what you're going to do. I'm like, I don't know, but God continues to stir, we must go. And we continue in the conversation on the airplane. And everything she told me was, I didn't have an answer. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what an engineer does there without electricity. I can't speak the language. It's where Nelson Mandela grew up. The language is Xhosa. I'm Afrikaans and English. So it's just like no answers. And the plane landed, and she said, you still want to go? I said, I don't know why. But you know what? I really feel God says we must go. And she's like, okay. 2 months ago in a worship service, God told me to go back to the village. And I said no, because I did my community service there as a doctor. I knew the circumstances is extremely hard. I knew in places like poverty, being there for a year, there's a lot of trauma. If people have time, unfortunately, the only things they do is drink and rape and have a lot of sex outside of marriage, which is quite traumatic for young girls being raped, not having rights over their bodies. And the men need something to do if they don't have work, and that's 90% of the young people. So they have a lot of energy, but that energy is driven in a very negative space because they don't work. So is that what you want? And it was a tough life, and I just told God I can't do it. But if my husband Ruan comes to me and say we must go, God, then I'll know it's you speaking. So it was a very clear call that God spoke to her first. She said no on condition that I don't think I can do it, but if you speak to my husband, God, then I will know it's you. It was just clear God. So we didn't even go to do a site visit. We literally told our work, we're going to quit and we're going to go. We did give it 6 months because we knew the context is you can't buy community land or accommodation. The only way you can have accommodation is when you work at the hospital. So that was our only way into the village. So again, the faith journey with the story of the complexity of making the decision around our having children or not. The other complexity was not having work, and I'm not knowing what I'm going to do. So I knew I'm going to do ministry. I just don't know how it's going to look like because I don't have any context of the village. I haven't visited, and I don't understand it. So we got married at 30, and 32 God called us. And then the day came when we had to leave, 27 December, and no work came through. We applied for my wife, and nothing came through. And we had our car packed with a big trailer and all our belongings, which wasn't much because we weren't married for long, but we at least had a bit of furniture and our belongings, and yeah, ready to go. And then we're like, okay, we don't have a job, but let's go. And we had 3 months of savings, and we were going to stay in one of the tourist areas where you can stay and then just drive through and volunteer for 3 months. And that was our approach at the moment. But we're like, maybe if we're there and we drive through every day and figure out if we are there volunteering, maybe that can open a door. We're not sure, but we have to go. And this was 27 December. And in South Africa, 25 to 31 December, the country shuts down. Because between Christmas and New Year, it's just everyone takes sort of forced leave in the context, except if it's a medical service. But definitely not government officials working on that time at all. That's a definite no. And we were halfway. It's an 18-hour drive. And we were halfway, 9 hours at Port Elizabeth and having lunch. And we got a phone call. And it said, a post just came through. Do you guys still want to come? And we said, we are halfway. We're on our way. We will see you in 9 hours. And I still remember the conversation. The conversation was great. Can you work the weekend? And that was only, I still believe an angel signed those papers, because who would work between that time? But again, I think it was God saying, do you trust me? And we had to step out in faith. And with the story of trusting God to give us children, that was the tension we're sitting with. But that was the first step of seeing, wow, God is with us really on this. But we first had to step out. Much rougher conditions than we could imagine. My wife was working brutal hours. It was really brutal in terms of the medicine, the stabbings that there was, girls that's 12-year-old, 13-year-old delivering babies, being raped, working from, the early morning, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock the evening, 14 days without a break. I remember on Easter, she only slept 8 hours right through Easter from the Friday to the Monday, and that was entering as a medical doctor, which he is, into a space of, oh, you're going to go serve God and do ministry. And suddenly it's like, this is brutal. And in that journey, also not getting a child. So you step out in faith, you're fighting a good fight, you're helping people in some of the worst conditions that there are, and there's just nothing. And after 6 months, we were done. And we're like, God, what up? Did we hear wrong? Should we be back in Cape Town? And I think we just went back to God and surrendered again. We're like, we know you're a good father. We know that. But what we're experiencing now is not life. It's not light. We know your promise is true of your yoke is easy and your burden is light. And just whatever is this, we're struggling. And we just felt to go back to God and saying, should we have our own children? Should we actually go back to Cape Town because we heard wrong? And maybe you said we must come, but the timing was wrong. We were just too excited to step into the call here of our life. And what was amazing was a month and a half later, we realized we're pregnant. And with that, the hospital finally got new doctors because they were doing quite well. And the government was waiting to see, is this guys for real? Are they going to stick it out? And when they saw they stick it out, we got extra doctors to relieve the stress and all the things we were struggling with. Even we were living with another couple at the time, there wasn't enough accommodation. Even that was solved. They started building, they got funding to build long-term accommodation, which then was such a breath of fresh air for us. Accommodation, finally having a child, and workload possible and bearable. And we got, what changed? And it's like, I'm a good father. I've been always wanting to give you this gift. But if I did that in the 6 months, it would have been a transaction. You step out in faith, now I do something for you. And then for the rest of your life, you would have treated me like that, a transactional God. Compared to knowing I'm a relational God and I give good gifts to my children because you're my son and daughter, not because it's a transaction of things you do for me. And I had to wait. I wanted to release these blessings over you, but your hearts were in the transactional space with me. And I realized it was just a moment of, but that's been my life. Living, doing things for God so He can do things for me. And then I started doing ministry with what we knew, and that was doing what we call DBS, or Discovery Bible Studies. So my wife were part of church planting school from an organization called All Nations, which was run by Floyd McClung, if those names are familiar, and David Watson teaching approach, which worked really well in other third world development contexts, which is DBS, where you take Bible studies and you help young people discover the word through opening conversation. The problem was we always got to hope. And the one thing is, what is one thing you can do different in this week of what you've learned? And continually they came back to us and say, continue to talk about hope, but you going home to a job with a car and food and opportunity. I'm going home to an abusive father, no food, and we've dropped out of school. So I don't know what you mean. And it was so hard for me to realize I actually don't have the right to speak into that space at the moment. And I'm trying to do a transactional approach here of, here's the word of God, do this, and now God will change your life. And I very quickly realized this is not going to work. Because the more I share hope, the more I run into walls that I'm so out of my depth of, it's not, I do this, then God will do this. God wants to do something much deeper and really invite me into a journey of these young people's lives. And actually realizing it's not an answer in the sky that's going to fix everything. It's going to be relational. and journeying with them. So that journey started with the organization then when helping hurts, which then realized, wow, I'm trying to help, but actually what I'm doing at the moment is I'm hurting people. So Chalmers, or the book When Helping Hurts, really started guiding us to say, when you look at poor people in the world of 60,000, the World Bank did a research of 60,000 people in poverty, and asking them, what do you need? We would think it's material things, because that's our worldview, that's Western, that's how we think of life. And number one was dignity. Number two was not having a purpose. Number three was your voice doesn't count. And you get to all these things, and number nine was, yes, I need material things. And I think, again, that's where God started journeying with us around really understanding at the heart of what is identity and belonging about, and how does He lead us towards that journey with the young people there. And the best example is we then did Bible studies right throughout the year around exploring. So I realized quickly the program approach is not going to work. So we invited them into our home to have dinner with us between 5 and 7 and eat, share a meal, have them in our space and share life. And I let them watch a movie. Then I quickly saw out my young kids because my wife was working at a hospital. That's just when I got my first daughter. And changing nappies, my wife is not there, so I must do that while they eat a meal, watch the movie, and then afterwards my daughter is in bed, and we then start debriefing the movie, and then we go into a Bible study. So after the year, which was the Alpha course, so after the year of the Alpha course, I'm like, so what session stood out for you? What changed you? Is there anything you can do differently? And they all thought, and they talk, and they laugh a little bit, and they agreed. And I asked again, come on, I'm curious, what session stood out for you? And they said, actually nothing, except you changed your children's nappies. That stood out for us. I'm like, now I'm confused. This is not my question. My question is, what spiritual lesson did you learn, and how did your life change? They're like, no, seriously, you changed nappies. Because in our context, that's the work of the women. In the first 3 months, you were such a douchebag. We can learn nothing from this guy because he's got a big identity crisis because he doesn't know, but he's doing the work of the woman. He's at home, feeding the daughter, cleaning her nappies, and that's a bit weird. And actually, dude, we're not going to learn anything from you, but we like the food in the movie. And that's when we shut down from anything you taught us because we're like, we can learn nothing from you. But doing that week in and week out, they saw my daughter running to me and hugging her. And they realized they don't have that. They don't have a father who would change their nappies. They don't have a father who would care for them. They don't have a father who would do the woman's job. But that's what they need, is the Father's love. And it wasn't a session, it wasn't a Bible study, it was an embodiment of the Father's love that is such a deep desire in them. And me doing that is what changed them and said, now I want a relationship with the Father because I can see it. That was when I realized, no program is going to change them. We need to do life together and be relational. And that's what the Father invited them to and what they saw through our lives. And that was the first open door to them being drawn to the Father, not God, but Father God. And that's why our chess program became a vehicle for relationship only, and to tell stories and all of these things. But it's not about the program, it's a way to draw young people into starting to do life together into Your Life Matters to spend time with me on the weekend, into on Sundays. This is what we're about. Your life matters, that you're part of this community, and your problem is our problem, and together we're going to solve things. And that's the journey of starting with, I'm just going to do these few things, and then people's lives will change, compared to starting with relationship that eventually was the transformation and them understanding God, moving towards following God.